Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. So happy to be with you today. And today we're going to be talking about how to reframe mindset blocks that can help you to heal from emotional eating. So essentially, we're going to talk about certain mindset blocks, belief systems, things that are holding you back from healing from emotional eating and can be hindering you from achieving the weight loss that you desire. So oftentimes achieving our goals of overcoming emotional eating, feeling amazing in our bodies, feeling true trust around food, and losing unwanted weight permanently comes from less about understanding more information about food and instead kind of getting into the nitty-gritty and doing and surgically, almost like surgically unpacking some of our mindset blocks and then repackaging those blocks into new belief systems, new mindsets. So I'm really excited today to talk about some of the main blocks that I myself have had, my clients have had, and I'm also excited to share with you the step-by-step ways of how I have reframed them. Some of my tricks, some of my tools, things that I still turn to this day. So let's dive in and get started. Many coaches, right? Many nutrition coaches, many people in the wellness industry, like I said, focus so much on food as the primary vehicle that we need to understand better, to get more information on, to have more structure around, to have some sort of plan in place. And once we have this rock solid food-based plan, we will all of a sudden lose the weight we want to lose, overcome emotional eating. And what they're really saying is that food has all the power. Ultimately, what the message is that we're hearing is that food is the most powerful vehicle to achieving our goals when it comes to health and weight. And ultimately, food is the most important thing we have to get under control in order to feel happier in our lives and more safe and more spontaneous and just more relaxed. But that's not true, right? You can't just follow a system of eating, whether that's a meal plan or a macro count or a reverse diet. You can't just train yourself through repetition of a certain diet plan or a certain meal plan or a certain meal prep. You know, it's not just gonna happen where you just follow blindly this thing and you do it enough times that it becomes your reality, and now you've just changed your behavior, right? That's just not how it works, right? It's not gonna happen that way. It's not gonna help us just repeating some sort of meal plan, some sort of, macro count, some sort of reverse diet system. It's not going to help us from turning to food as a coping mechanism when we get triggered. And it's not going to help us stop turning to food as a way to avoid or distract from uncomfortable emotions and experiences. And I could speak from my own personal experience of this. Like I've talked about before, I struggled with emotional eating, really destructive relationship with food, abusing my body, in very destructive ways for about 15 years. So from the time I was 16 years old until about the time I was, 31 or so. And this, in those 15 years, 15 or so years, I looked to so many different things to give me that anchor of stability that I was looking for with food. I focused so heavily on diets, on whatever celebrity diet was going on. I used to read back in the day in the late 90s, early 2000s, or magazines. So Cosmo, Health Magazine, Self Magazine, whatever magazine was around, I would buy it and I would try to follow the diet. And I would hope that my body would then look like the celebrity that was touting the diet, which obviously it never happened. And I spent so much time and mental energy just trying to control food. And what I realized was that it wasn't really about food. It was about the underlying beliefs and mindsets that I had about food. So I thought certain foods were good. I thought certain foods were bad. Also, focusing on food so often and so much kept me distracted from what was really going on internally, which was that at at the worst and the most destructive of my relationship with food, I was probably in my early 20s. I was transitioning from college life into young adult life. So I was there was not a lot of structure in my day. So I was so used to having my days be structured by classes, by different external things, that when I transitioned into adult life and there were a lot more pressures, and the resistance and the pressure was different than it was in college, I had a lot of fear and stress around that, and I gained a ton of weight in my 20s. It was really that time in my life that I felt the most out of control. I didn't understand why I was constantly trying to monitor my food. I was constantly holding myself to unrealistic standards when it comes to eating. I put so many rules on myself, yet my weight kept going up. My clothes kept feeling tighter. I felt so much less confident and connected to myself. And it was it was really it was really a problem. I found myself very often in the throes of restriction and binge cycles, negotiating with myself, all these different just emotionally draining experiences with food. And it took me a long time to realize that food is neutral. It's neither good nor is it bad. And food is not the root problem when it comes to emotional eating. And that's because food is a substance and eating is an experience. And the experience of eating is an experience that we've evolved into exploiting as a coping mechanism that started all the way back from when we were children. So, one of the things that I like to just normalize for my clients and even for myself when I was healing myself from emotional eating, reframing my mindset blocks, really diving deep into how I arrived at this relationship with eating and food, I realized that it's not unique to me, our relationship with eating, and how exploiting eating as a coping mechanism is so pervasive and it's so human. It's such a human thing because that's essentially what we did as children, as babies. If we were feeling uncomfortable or we were crying, we would get a bottle, we would get our mother's breast. And so we were almost indoctrinated into this oral fixation as a way to soothe from discomfort. And bringing awareness and attention to that is so huge. Bringing awareness and attention to oral fixation as a main trigger and a main behavior. And we've actually trained our brains and our nervous systems to, as adults, go back to some of those coping mechanisms using food, activating the oral fixation mechanism for soothing. It's very unconscious unless we intentionally change that. And that's why it's so important to have this curious attitude and to be able to reflect on our behaviors in this way and ask questions, because the only way that we could change behaviors is if we can critically, without critiquing ourselves, right? So there's a difference between being critical and critiquing, right? So if we can critically look at ourselves and say, wow, am I using oral fixation as a coping mechanism? Interesting. That light bulb, that little amount of space is all you need to change. And one of the terms that we use when we change a behavior pathway is called neuroplasticity. And the definition of neuroplasticity is the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connection. So essentially, neuroplasticity means that the nervous system changes its response. So something that maybe the nervous system used to go to a maladaptive response, now we can train the nervous system to go to a more adaptive response. And in order to shift from these maladaptive habits and behaviors, we need to start with our thoughts, and we need to start with our mindsets and emotional connections that are related to eating and food. So in order to shift from these maladaptive eating behaviors, eating habits, it's so necessary that we first shift our thoughts and emotional connections related to eating and food. And we all have certain mindsets and subconscious associations that are embedded in our thought processes that we don't even recognize that they become habits, because it feels like who we are and how it has to be. And so disentangling that is huge, right? We have these mindsets and subconscious associations that are embedded into our thought processes, and we think they're facts. We think they are our identity. We think they're who we are, and we think this is it. This is how it has to be, but it's not. Okay, so I had a client who, her name is Katie, and every time that she would go hiking with her family, with her husband and kids, they would go to a diner afterwards, and she would end up ordering like the greasiest thing there, and she'd feel like crap afterwards. And in her mind, she thinks to herself, this is what we do when we go on a hike, right? We go on a hike and we go to the diner, and this is what I eat, right? I eat this greasy breakfast, breakfast sandwich or whatever, this breakfast platter, whatever it is. And it's almost unconscious, habitual thing because that's the ritual. And that's one example of a mindset block, right? The mindset block that she has to eat this way because it's a ritual. Another example is I'm on my period or I'm about to get my period, so I'm just eating so much junk food. I'm just eating so much chocolate. I'm so hungry. And I'm not to say that that's not always the case, but again, these are mindset blocks that we believe to be facts when they're not. They're simply blocks. And so, in order to break through these mindset blocks and look at food and eating in a new way, it's important to identify more of them. So, I just gave you some examples of a couple, right? A ritual, an attitude about when we're on our period, our hormones. I have a hormone shift, so I'm going to eat this way. I have a ritual, so I'm going to eat this way. And some other mindset blocks could be FOMO or people pleasing. So I'm going to a party, so I have to eat this way. I'm going on a vacation, so it's vacation eating. Week versus weekend eating mindset. Okay, so this is how I eat during the week, and then it's the weekend, and I'm gonna let my flag fly. It's weekend, it's the weekend time, so let's just let it all go. I went to a party and we drank a lot, and so we go out afterwards, and I let myself go. All my friends were eating this, and this is what they had there. And so this is what I ate. Using a diet to get control over eating and springboard a new healthy lifestyle. Right? That's another type of mindset block. Saying that I'm going to go on this diet and projecting that this new healthy lifestyle is going to come because you're following this diet plan. And other blocks could be specific food experiences, specific eating experiences, like struggling to say no to people, feelings of low self-confidence or self-value, relying on diets or using food again as a way to control your emotional experience, feeling like we deserve to eat this, like we deserve treats. I earned this, feeling like we earned a certain way of eating, right? Another mindset block, I exercised, I burned 600 calories, so therefore I could eat this now, kind of negotiating, bartering with yourself. These are blocks. And I already talked about in a previous episode that I deserve to eat this mentality and all that goes along with that. So go back and listen to that one if you haven't listened to that yet. But identifying these barriers and these blocks is the first step to overcoming them, especially since they're so subconscious, they're so unconscious, it can be so hard to recognize them. But one of my favorite sayings, and I might have made it up, I don't know, but it's you can't heal what you don't see. In order to heal, you have to be willing to see. And sometimes what we see isn't so pretty at first and can bring up a lot of prickliness and edginess, but we have to push through that prickliness, that edginess. We have to be willing to put our toes closer to the fire in order to heal. And so the way to start to heal after you're willing to see some of these mindset blocks. So as you're listening to this, you might be saying, yeah, I do that. I didn't know that was a block. I thought that was just something that was regular. Think about how you approach eating within your life context. When are you most apt to turn to food to feel relaxed or in control or connected to others, or even numb, right? When do you use food to feel numb? These are good times to sense your potential triggers. And these trigger feelings are often related to your mindset blocks. So, identifying how these blocks manifest in our lives is an essential step to overcoming them. And then, once you have a sense for which blocks are the most pervasive in your life, are the most magnified in your life, then you could start working towards breaking free from them. So let's look at some of the strategies and tools that I use with my clients to address these blocks. And some of these things you might have done before, but I'm going to give you some unique perspectives on how to approach these tools. So journaling and inquiry, right? I feel like journaling, it's like everyone says journal, but these are specific targeted questions that I want you to think about. And journaling doesn't always have to be actually sitting there with a notebook and paper and writing them down. One of my favorite ways to journal is to drop a question into my consciousness, and to let it simmer. No pressure to write anything down, find an answer. Just let it simmer. Be willing to ask myself a question without having an answer and letting that be okay, and trusting that the answer will come. So, one of the questions that you want to ask in your journaling is, what am I afraid of losing if I change my behavior with food? Okay, so what am I afraid of losing if I change my behavior with food? If you go back to the example I gave with Katie and the hiking ritual, when I asked her that question, what are you afraid of losing if you change your behavior with eating this greasy breakfast sandwich that then ends up triggering you to feel bad about yourself and then affects all of your eating choices the rest of the day and that week potentially? What are you afraid of losing? She says, I'm afraid that I'm not going to feel as connected to her family if she doesn't eat what they eat. Okay, so that's something that you can get to a deeper fear, a deeper emotional core as to what might be creating this mindset block for you. Another question is, who am I afraid of disappointing if I exert a boundary or state a preference when it comes to eating? Hey, are you afraid of disappointing someone? Is this a FOMO or people-pleasing thing we talked about before as a mindset block? Another strategy you could do is to just have a chat and just have an open, vulnerable conversation with a trusted friend or mentor. There is so much power in sharing vulnerability. Simply sharing your fears with a trusted friend and mentor can help so much, because once we express our fears and bring voice to patterns that are not serving us, they're often disempowered and we're able to break through. So being willing to say out loud some of these awarenesses and blocks you think you might have. And again, you don't have to have the answer just yet, but just being willing to be with the current experience and vulnerability helps to almost take the air out of the balloon. It disempowers it. And then a third one is affirmations. And I love affirmations. I keep affirmations on my phone. I keep affirmations in my end table. Different seasons of my life, I keep affirmations more visible than others. But keeping affirmations is so important to snap you out of any mindset blocks that you have about your current experience, because it's so easy for us to get super caught up in our in the moment experience. And we talk so much about being present, but if we're in the moment experience that is a downward spiral as far as our confidence goes, our esteem, our self-esteem, our feelings of trust, right? So our nervous system is actually getting much more constricted, right? It's getting tighter and tighter in, and it's getting more fearful, and it's getting more overprotected or protection based. affirmations work so well to zoom out and help you to see the bigger picture of who you are and help you to visualize, right? Visualize the potential of who you can be. And again, you can activate a feeling inside of yourself that directs energy towards this future self that represents our aspirations. And it's powerful in its ability to transform because feelings are such a huge vehicle to creating our reality. So if our feeling is fear, if our feeling is protection, if our feeling is tightness, that's going to be where we are. But if our feeling is openness and our feeling is trust and our feeling is potential and our feeling is expansiveness, that's going to be our reality. And so some of my favorite affirmations are, I am 100% capable of overcoming emotional eating. Another one of my favorites is, I do not have to feel guilty for eating food I enjoy because I trust in my ability to eat these foods responsibly. A third affirmation is, I am attuned and conscious of my motivation for eating. And my fourth affirmation, the last one I'm going to share with you today, is, I take care of myself by paying attention to when my emotions are influencing my desire to eat. So I take care of myself by paying attention, right? So even if it might not be the most comfortable and it could be easier to just numb out with food, you are actually taking care of yourself and aligning yourself with your vision for your high value life when you pay attention to when your emotions are influencing your desire to eat. So I hope that you loved this episode as much as I love sharing it with you, because mindset blocks and breaking through them are so important so that you could start healing and overcome emotional eating, achieve all of your health goals, your body goals, your confidence goals, and everything starts with mindset. Everything starts with mindset. So don't forget to join me again next week with another new episode about emotional eating so you can fall in love with eating, start losing weight, and keep it off with sustainable strategies and lasting change. And if you found this episode enlightening, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone you know who might need to hear this message. I also have so many free resources on my website to help you on your journey to loving food and losing weight. Just go to www.bewellbyak.com. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating